Welcome to Platemark. I'm your host, Ann Shafer. Today is a very special episode. We're coming to you from the 30th Annual McNay Print Fair in San Antonio, Texas. This is our first ever recording in front of a live audience, and I couldn't ask for a better guest to share the stage with than master printer James Stroud of Center Street Studio. We're diving into the history of Atelier 17, the alchemy of the artist-printer relationship, and why printmaking remains the most collaborative medium in the art world. Without further ado, let's take you to the McNay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to help us kick off the 30th McNay Print Fair with this very, very special event, the first ever in-person recording of the acclaimed printmaking podcast, Platemark, Prints and the Printmaking Ecosystem. I am Elizabeth Mitchell. I'm the McNay's head of curatorial affairs and curator of prints and drawings. And I really want to give my sincerest thanks to the McNay's Department of Marketing and Communications and the Education Department and the McNay's Douglas Curatorial Fellow, Maya Strohmeyer, for making all this technology and magic come together tonight. And I am extremely happy to be introducing Ann Shafer, an independent curator, a leading expert on intaglio printmaking by Stanley William Hayter in Atelier 17. Shafer has held curatorial positions at the Whitney Museum of American Art and the National Gallery of Art. She is a former associate curator of prints, drawings, and photographs at the Baltimore Museum of Art, and she organized the Baltimore Contemporary Print Fair for many, many years, many times. Currently, Shafer organizes the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair, which is coming up next month. She hosts the podcast Platemark, Prints and the Printmaking Ecosystem, and she writes a blog about her favorite works of art at annshafer.com. So please check them out. Ann is joined tonight by James Stroud, an artist and a master printer based in Massachusetts. Stroud established the Center Street Studio Printmaking Workshop after receiving an MFA from the Yale School of Art, and for over 4 decades. Jim has printed and published hundreds of prints with both established and emerging artists while simultaneously maintaining his own printmaking studio practice. Work produced at Center Street Studio has been collected at major institutions, including the National Gallery of Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the Yale University Art Gallery, and here at the McNay Art Museum. So please join me in welcoming Ann and Jim for the conversation.
Wow, thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having us both here. We're thrilled to do this for you, and welcome everybody who listens to Platemark and those of you who are about to. It's so exciting to celebrate the 30th anniversary of a print fair to me, because having run one at a museum before, I know what goes into it. So kudos to the entire staff for keeping the light burning for printmaking. Before we dive in, a huge, massive thank you to Elizabeth for inviting me. We've known each other a long time, and it couldn't have been a better set of circumstances to bring me down to San Antonio. We're here with the master himself. Jim Stroud is the man. He's the heart and soul of Center Street Studio. He's a collaborator to the greats and a man, rumor has it, that has acid running through his veins.
Oh.
So I'm thrilled to be here with him. We have a lot of pictures. We're going to zip pretty quick. We're going to try and zip pretty quick.
My fault. Guilty as charged.
Yeah. Jim is going to tell us about just the history of the shop, but also some of the greats that he's worked with, and I'm going to try and throw him off by peppering some questions in between that are going to make him think.
Well, first I just want to say thank you for doing this, including me and Ann in this, and also I'm honored to be asked to do a Platemark interview, because you've interviewed so many great people, especially a lot of people like me, printers and publishers, I love listening to them because I get to hear how we all got into this mess. And we've all had very interesting journeys to our way here. So it's been really fun. So to be part of that club is really honored. So thank you. So these are fun pictures. That's a young buck in Paris in 1980, working with Stanley William Hayter. And
we should tell people who Hayter was. Hayter started this crazy print shop in Paris in 1927 called Atelier 17, which had an incredible effect across Europe, but also across America during the war. And Jim got there, and obviously Hayter's quite elderly at this point.
He turned 80. He turned 80 that year I was there, yeah.
Right, and so he was still welcoming young students in.
Yeah. And I was sent there. I studied art at college, and the printmaking professor at Holy Cross College in Worcester was a massier at the Atelier for 7 years, from like 70 to 77, before he came to Holy Cross to teach. And so he was the one who suggested that I go work with Hayter. And it was, I often tell people I feel like I grew up in Paris. I mean, I was brought up in a very sheltered suburban life growing up, and that was my first trip abroad, and it was absolutely spectacular year. And if I didn't run out of money, I'd still be there. I would not be here. I'd be speaking French all day, all long. Yeah.
At Hayter's Atelier 17, he would start you out with a plate, and he would ask you to kind of put you through your paces. Well, you should describe it, because I've never done it for him.
Yeah, so all the nouveau, the new people who came in were expected to do two experimental plates. One was an etching experimental plate, and one was an engraving using the Biron, which is much more challenging because a lot of people don't have that skill. And so what you're seeing here is a picture of, he gives you a series of directives to engrave on the plate, make certain lines, basically to try to alter the visual space on it with these directives. And then after he's finished giving you directives, then he encourages you to continue working on it and making something of your own. And that's what you're seeing here is all the states from the first few directives about halfway through, and then I just started doing these sort of arabesque lines, very sort of Hayter-esque, very Atelier 17-esque, and it became something really special that I really enjoyed. I worked on it for over the course of the year, off and on. And I found it recently, not recently, 2016, in a file. And I said, I've got to see what this looks like. So I printed it, and I really liked it, so I editioned it. And it's actually my print of the fair, this print fair special at this fair this weekend. You can buy that very print. You too can buy it. You can too. You can own this, and it's a wonderful. So, and the states that you're seeing there, you see all the different states and the thought process and the engraving along the way and the density of the space. And then I donated that to the Baltimore Museum of Art.
Well, so the backstory is when I was at the BMA still, I was working towards, knocked on my thing. I was working on a big show about Atelier 17, which never saw the light of day. And during the process of organizing it, Jim offered his Biron studies to the museum as a gift. And I was thrilled, of course, because to be able to tell so clearly the story of how Hayter would have you start when you got to the studio, to me was just so didactic and wonderful. So it's still in the collection, and because the show never happened, Jim wants it back. But guess what?
I do.
There's no give-backsies.
I know. No
give-backsies. So back in the States, you started, did you know right away, you were like, I'm going to start a studio?
No, not at all. I mean, when I came back to the States, I lived in New York City working on my portfolio to apply for graduate school. And I wanted to go to Yale. That's the only place I applied to. And so I did that. I met the girlfriend I had there at the time, now my wife of 38 years, who's here in the audience. And so I had no clue. I didn't even know what a master printer was, to be quite honest with you. So I was shortlisted to get a teaching job at a college in Western Massachusetts. And I was shortlisted. I was one of 3 candidates. I did not expect to get it because I was, the least experienced, of course, right out of graduate school. And so Janine was attending a series of lectures up at Harvard one weekend, and she came out of the auditorium, and on the bulletin board was one of those flyers with a picture of a press, and it said, "For sale, printmaking workshop, for details, call." And it had all little tear-off numbers, none of which had been torn off. So she took the whole thing down, and she came back to New Haven and said, "If you're not going to get that teaching job, go buy a print shop." And I think it was a joke. And I said, "That's interesting." We called the guy up. We drove up that weekend on our little powder blue Volkswagen Bug, And it was, it wasn't, as you can see, the space was a beautiful space. It was a little rough around the edges, but the press was an American French tool press. It had, everything you needed to have a workshop, a studio. And so I was already in a negative cash flow with student loans. I figured, what's another $6,000? It was $6,000 to buy the entire thing. As soon as I signed the bill of sale and agreed to do it, I get a call from that prestigious college that I got the job.
Oh.
But it was on the other side of the state. So I turned it down. And that was astounding to a lot of people, everyone in my class. I was the only one in my class that year to be offered a job. And they all thought I must have been a rich kid, which I was not. And I said, no, I'm going to start this print shop. And my idea was to set up a studio up there. It's in Cape Ann, it's in Gloucester. There's a huge art community there. So my idea was to set up a shop where I can rent studio time to other people. I would work there myself during the day, paint at night, and I could pay my bills that way. And had I done my market research, I would have found that every artist on Cape Ann had 3 years free access to that press, and that they had no intention of paying me, or the likes of me, anything to use it. So I had to come up with a business plan because I didn't have a business plan. You imagine an artist without a business plan. So I was fortunate enough that a couple of contacts from graduate school, I started inviting artists to come and work with me and collaborate with them as a master printer. I was not a master printer. I called myself one, but nobody questioned my credentials. And I started doing contract work where I would just simply charge for my services. And that kept me going pretty well. And then later on, I started going into the publishing aspect of it. And we can talk about that a little later.
Yeah. So there have been several iterations of where the shop was. We're going to run through these.
Yeah, that's great. That was the first one. The one you just saw was South Boston, in a rum distillery, and it was in the lab where they tested their product. So I got the laboratory space. It was pretty cool. And then I moved into this big industrial space in the Fort Point Channel section of Boston, which is where all the artist studios were. And it was big open space, 3,600 square feet, with a gallery and great storage. It was a pretty spectacular space.
But so why did you decide to build?
Well, because my landlord started to go crazy and was raising my rent every 60 days, and so the writing was on the wall. He wanted me out, and so we moved to this house, this beautiful 19th century farmhouse in Milton, Massachusetts, which is 6 miles south of downtown. And we had enough room to build a barn. So I raised some cash and I took out another loan and we built this beautiful post and beam barn on our property.
If you're ever up in Boston, it's worth the trip because it's a beautiful space.
That building went up in 5 days, by the way. Janine designed it, did the footprint, and they crafted the timbers up in Maine. They brought them down on a Sunday night, and by the next Saturday, it was tight to the weather. It was pretty amazing. It's a beautiful space.
Tight to the weather. It sounds like a true New Englander.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't finished. All that cladding I did with my studio assistant over the course of the summer. But great. The building, it is not a stitch of metal holding that thing together. It's all pegged and it's all.
So when was the building finished? When did you start, or when did you move in? I guess?
So it went up in May, and we finished all the interior, all the heating, everything by I think October.
In 2001.
2001, correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So off you go.
There you go. Yeah, this is it. My first publishing job. This is when so contract, just to explain to folks who don't know, contract work is when an artist hires me to help them craft their plates, pays me to print the edition. We establish what the cost is going to be, and they pay me. At the end, they take the edition and off they go. I also established a tradition that I would get the first print, the bon Atelier, the first print off the plate that the artist says is okay to print. And then I also printed 3 extra prints called Center Street Studio proofs that they didn't pay for that would go into my archive in case, the money got tight. And that was very successful. But I realized that rather than getting $50 a print, if I got $500 a print for selling it, it would make a little bit more sense. So what I did was I invited Lester Johnson, who taught at Yale when we were there. Matter of fact, I met my wife Janine in his figure drawing class, and so I invited him to make the plates with me, and I printed the edition. I funded the entire project, and then in his case, we ended up splitting the edition 50-50. He went off to his dealers with his group, and I got to sell them myself, and it was astoundingly successful project. So it was my first, I think we did that in 1984, my first year, and I sold a bunch of them right off the bat, and I'm like, wow, this is great. I hope nobody else figures this out. I literally thought I was making this up. I didn't realize it was 300 years of precedent of print publishing before me. Ignorance was bliss. I mean, I would have never gotten into it had I known how hard it was going to be. But in this case, it was quite easy. And so I was off, and pretty much 99% of the work I do is in publishing now. I do very little contract work.
Yeah, so for everybody, there's two tracks, right? You can do the contract printing, you can do both, obviously. You can do contract printing and you can do publishing, but within each of those columns, there are any number of variations of how you could do it.
Right,
you can,
correct.
You can pay for the whole thing, the artist can, the variations are very individual. Each project has its own set of rules.
Correct.
So instead, people say, well, what's the, the breakup or the layout or whatever? Well, it depends on what they decided over the beer.
Exactly. And with Lust Street, all the projects we did, we split the edition. But in most cases, I co-own the edition with the artists, and then they receive money every time I sell the print. So
I think each publisher probably finds a method they feel like is working for them, and that's usually what they present. And on we go. All right, so Nell Blaine.
Nell Blaine, yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
She was great, and she had a summer home up in Gloucester. And she heard that a real printmaker had moved into that space, and she sent someone over. She worked from wheelchair. She contracted polio on a painting tour throughout Europe, and I forget what year it was, but it was before the vaccine or just around the time of the vaccine. In any case, she was stricken with polio and painted from a wheelchair her whole career. But in any case, I would have to schlep plates with hard grounds over to her little compound in East Gloucester, and she would sit in the garden and draw directly onto the plates, plein air, and then she'd call me up, and I would go back there, and I'd etch it, I'd proof it, I'd send it back, I'd bring it back to her. We went back and forth like that. So we did 6 or 7 prints that way. Very simple, nothing too elaborate. We did a more elaborate color aquatint, but that was actually being published by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, their mezzanine gallery.
Oh, right.
And that was quite a colorful little floral thing. But.
Well, what Jim's talking about also points to the fact that there can be any number of situations between the printer and the artist, where the artist can be in the studio with Jim and they can be working towards a solution of something, or they can do mailing back and forth the plates, or somebody can come in and say, make this.
Yeah.
So the variations of that relationship are huge as well.
Yeah.
And very individual.
Yeah. Nobody phones in prints at Center Street Studio, by the way. No phone-ins.
As it should be.
As it should be.
Do you feel like, it's your job to facilitate their vision, right? Mm-hmm. Of course. Do you find your own artistic DNA seeping in sometimes, or are you very careful to let them be?
That's a great question. I certainly don't tell anyone what to do, but I think my attitude and my approach to etching, specifically, because that's the most complicated technique we do, other than woodcut or monotype. I think my attitude is much more aggressive in etching than most other master printers. And so I think my suggestions of what direction we go might just naturally be that way. And the artist, not knowing themselves, most of my artists are not printmakers, they're all painters or sculptors. So they just trust me, which is really nice. They just trust me. So what's really good is if I make a mistake, they don't know, because they don't know, right? Not that I make any mistakes, but the point is that it's just my attitude of how I would approach it. As an artist myself, I would say if this was my print, I would do it this way, and I suggest it, and we go that way, and it seems to have been successful,
Mistakes are often a turning point, right?
Opportunities, we call them opportunities.
Perfect, exactly, because it can be, you could try and cover it up and make sure it's not there, or it can be the moment when you say, let us try this other direction. Yeah,
and most of the artists, you work with, if something goes awry, it's like someone we'll get to John Walker later, probably one of the most powerful painters in living, and he's someone who's sort of like, let's see what happens. He brought a plate in once that had stuff on it, I had no clue. I sent him home with a plate, it comes back with stuff on it. I'm like, what is this? He goes, I don't know, throw it in a drink and let's see what happens. And all this stuff's bubbling up, and he just wrestles it into submission, and that's a real artist, That guy is crazy great.
So maybe we should tell everybody why etching is so challenging, and
why it's the greatest of all printmaking arts.
It's
a great segue into the story, because here's a picture of me and Aaron Fink and a wonderful artist named James Hansen in Paris at the Morelot workshop. So my dealer of my own work in New York was Eric Morelot, who is the grandson of Fernand Morelot, Picasso's lithographer. And he took on my work. He showed my paintings mostly, and we'd always have this running like argument as which is the greater art, etching or lithography. And he's like, Jim, my family's made a lot of money in lithography. I said, I know, but it's like drawing on rocks. Cavemen drew on rocks, you know. So one day he says to me, James, I'd like to publish prints by you. And I said, great, let's make some prints. He says, I want to publish lithographs by you. And I said, go to hell, I'm not going to print no lousy lithographs. He goes, I'm going to send you to the Morelot workshop in Paris to make lithographs. I said, I'll make lithographs. And I made my lithographs in the same studio that Picasso sat in making his lithographs, which is just insane. And Eric's father was my master printer. Insane. So I made some damn good lithographs.
And that shop's still there. It's EDM now.
No, they sold it. Well, the shop is there, but they sold it.
And all those stones, the library.
Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
Yeah. So, but anyway, he sent the three of us over to Paris at the Morelot workshop to make lithographs, which was really a lot of fun. But what you're seeing here is the Aaron Fink, a huge monotype. I think that's 60 by 40. I have a big 4 by 8 foot etching press, and we do these enormous, some of which you can see in my booth this weekend. Very large.
Surprise,
some
surprise.
fresh ones. They still smell fresh. They're so good.
This is a secret you may not know, is that when dealers leave home, or exhibitors.
I'm wearing that hat too.
Okay, sorry, yes. That sometimes they're throwing wet things into frames and putting them in the car and coming.
What?
That's never happened to you?
What's that?
That you put a wet print into.
Oh, no, I've not done that. Gosh, no. That's so unprofessional.
If we walked into Center Street Studio at 2 a.m. and you were on press and crazed doing a deadline, what's on the stereo and what does the air smell like?
That's really great. So what's on the stereo is usually for me classical music. We love classical music, but it could be what the artist has left behind, which is oftentimes some crazy music. Markus Linnenbrink listens to some of the strangest music I've ever heard, like jazz made through industrial sounds that have been remixed into jazz music, which is really annoying when you're working for 8-10 hours a day. I had one artist who liked to listen to Madonna a lot and sang and the Carpenters, the same artist, and knew every word to every song. Like, that was weird. So obviously they have free reign over the stereo and they get to play their playlist, and I should write a book on that. That'd be pretty funny.
But when they're gone and the hangover of their music is still going, does it help you stay in the mindset of working with them?
Yeah, to some degree, but I couldn't play the Carpenters. But maybe not Madonna, that'd be good. But no, it's mostly classical music on my end. And a lot of times it's silence because sometimes I can't be distracted. You know.
Really?
Yeah, no, I work in silence a lot.
Ooh.
I sometimes have NPR on, but that gets annoying too. So.
Sorry.
But
what does the air smell like?
The air smell. It's the strangest, most pungent of. I do have a HEPA filter going all the time, so it does minimize the toxicity of the air. But it's got this beautiful smell of linseed oil and inks and grounds. No acids are always put away unless we're out actually using them. But it has a real distinct smell. It's amazing. I just went back to the space that is Atelier 17 in Paris on Rue Didot, and I'll tell you, I walked into that space and it smelled exactly as it smelled in 1980. It was like I was transported back in time. Unbelievable. Very strange.
Yeah.
So, and my shop smells different than that because some of the materials have changed over the years. But they used to use kerosene to take the hard ground off the plate, and they used to put the kerosene in sawdust in a box, and you'd put the plate in there and leave it, and then the soaked sawdust. I mean, OSHA would be like all over you in the United States, and that's how you actually remove the hard ground. And that smell specifically was pretty intense, but it was pretty cool.
Oh, man.
I know. It's
yeah.
great.
All right, so
we
John
should have made this smell-o-vision. This would have been good if I brought spray it out here and you get to smell the shop. Get John Waters and he would do the scratch, the old scratch vision.
All right, we're not talking about him. Are we talking about photogravure?
Sure. Yeah, that's great. I love making. I don't do the plates. So yeah, but no, only because you have to be really set up for that. I mean, photogravure is a way you can transpose a photograph from a film positive onto a copper plate and etch it physically into the copper plate, and that requires. I can do it. I've done it, but you have to set up your whole shop for that, and it is so tricky and so finicky that I just can't bring myself to do it. So I hired the best to do it, like Lothar
Osterberg, who's been a guest on the pod, by the way.
Yeah, and so he's made pretty much all the plates for me, and he's done a great job. And this is Robert Park Harrison, who's a terrific photographer. Now goes by Robert and Shanna Park Harrison because he's always in the photographs, and people ask, well, if you're in the photograph, who's taking the photograph? And he says, well, my wife hits the shutter. And he's like, well, yeah, why isn't she the photographer? And they're like, think about it. Yeah, so it's now Robert and Shanna Park Harrison.
Is she involved at all?
She is, yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, no, she is. So she not only, but they've often discussed the ideas of the images and whatnot. And all the props that are in the photographs he makes and sets it up. They're really fantastic. They're really incredible photographers. Anyway, and they're a real challenge to print. So I'm really good at printing them, by the way.
I believe it.
So, I mean, it's like requires a lot of finesse in the wiping and a shit ton of pressure, excuse my language, shit ton of pressure on the press. And I have a really big custom motorized etching press that can really do the job. They're seamless.
Photogravures are often confusing for people because they look exactly like a photograph, but because they're printed with ink on paper as opposed to the chemicals on a coated paper, they count as prints in a print department if you're the cataloger, but they look like photographs. So they're one of those crisscrossers. Yeah.
And at the time, I was doing a series of prints that I coated my own prints with a thin coat of beeswax to give them this beautiful surface, and the artist really liked that. And he actually, in his early part of his career, in his large-scale photographs, was coating them with beeswax because I think in the 19th century they thought that by coating photographs, which were fragile at the time, with beeswax, it might preserve them. It didn't, but it didn't hurt them either. And so he says, can we put beeswax on my prints? And so I had to actually tape off every image and hand wax every single print. So it took me longer to wax them than it took me to print them. And every single one of his editions have the beeswax coating on them. Oof. It's insane.
Yikes.
Yeah. And that was a 2-plate color. Yeah.
Oh, I saw this in your booth today.
Yes, I have. I brought that with me. This is Ann Harris, beautiful painter, absolutely fantastic painter out of Chicago. And I met her at graduate school and early on asked her to do these. And she was doing these incredible, intense images of babies, of her son, Max, at the time. And so I just sent her plates, and she started them at home, brought them to the studio, and then continued on with dry point. Her work is so beautifully painted, but the images are really kind of disturbing at times. And so they pull you in with their beauty and their finesse, and then you'll get real close, and you're like, ew, look at that baby. I mean, it's that little sack and everything. So, but it's that real weird place where you want to go in and then you look and all the details kind of like creep you out. So it's just, they're fantastic.
Oops, sorry.
There's Bill Thompson. It's really interesting to see, have you noticed that none of the styles of these artists, there's no sort of consistency of styles? I mean, there's not a look. There's not a Center Street Studio look. If I go to an artist exhibition and I really like their work, and the gears on my head start turning, because if we did this, this, and this, we can make a really meaningful print based on the image. Not a reproduction, not a facsimile of what I'm seeing in front of me, but I can translate their image issues in my head into the printmaking process and establish a sort of this linear technical strategy that we can follow, that can make something that makes sense to them vis-a-vis their primary medium. And so, and what's funny, I'm talking about this, looking at this particular print, which is so far from anything Bill Thompson had ever done. But he came to me and said, I want to get outside this sort of minimal thing I'm doing. I want to do something that's sort of maximal or crazy. And so he told me what he wanted to do. And so I took a ball bearing and I dipped it in sugar lift. It's called a lift ground. And we built this rack for the plate, and I dropped the ball, and he would roll the ball around, and its trace would then continue all around like that. And we did that many, many times, and then etched it 3 different levels of gray to black, and that's the plate. It was insane. It was so far outside the box for him. It's kind of funny that this is the image you chose, because you'll see nothing like this of Bill Thompson's.
Maybe because I like it.
It's really good. I mean, I called it, it's called Locust, but I called it Bill's Cry for Help.
Okay.
You'll understand that comment when you see the rest of his prints.
Well, that's true. So I love your relationship with George because he makes the most incredibly intricate. This one's big too, right?
It's huge, yeah. That's
30
huge.
by
30 by 40 almost.
Yeah,
I think.
It's gigantic. But he did it through the mail, if I remember correctly.
Yes, we ship all of his prints because it takes him like 18 months to draw on these plates. And this is a standard hard ground, it's a copper plate with the hard ground, etching ground on it. And with a needle, he simply line and stipple, no aquatint, just line and stipple. So I make this crate that suspends the plate inside. It's clamped. That's why there are borders around so they're clamped so that the ground, there's nothing touching the ground when I ship the crate down to him. And then he spends 18 months on the plate, and he ships it back to me, and then I have to etch 18 months worth of drawing and make sure it's just right. And so I'm hovering over the acid bath to make sure there's no crevé. You know what crevé is? That's when you have lines cross, they crosshatch, and when it starts to break down at the intersection, that's called crevé in French. And so I have to be careful that doesn't happen. And then when it starts, I pull it out, and then I dry it off, and I put a new ground. I proof it, I put a new ground on it, and I send it back down to him, and he continues working on it. And then he sends it back to me. I etch it again, and then boom. So it's usually 2 shots.
2? That's it?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But if with crevé, you and George probably would be the only people on the planet to notice such a thing.
Yeah, I'm all over it. Well, he wouldn't know what that is, but it doesn't matter. He just draws it, and then he just hopes for the best when it comes back.
One.
Yeah, no, I have to look. I mean, I don't want to. Can you imagine screwing up a guy whose plate who worked 18 months on it? That would be a really bad day. So I sort of babysit the whole thing.
Sometimes mistakes can turn into...
Not in this case. I mean, a mistake would be so obvious. I would say, well, the printmaker really sucked on this one. Look what happened here. It's broke down, and it was, you can see every single line, every little thing in this plate. And that is Tucker the pig. He exists. That was his neighbor's pig that lived in their house. He was house trained.
Oh, jeez.
He has his own web page and his own Facebook page. So.
Okay,
and come see them. I have all of George prints in my booth, and they are spectacular. He's out of another century.
Okay, so my question leading up to Markus's work is there one artist who has changed your way of thinking about how things should be done?
Yes, well, that would be certainly with Markus.
Softball.
There you go, softball. So Markus started with me in 2002. We made an aquatint, pretty straightforward, pretty cool little print. And then he wanted to come back and do monotypes. And so we did standard monotype, gave him a plexiglass plate, some inks and whatnot. He started working on it, and we got totally lackluster results. He's looking at him going, meh. So we worked on all day, and it really felt like he was ready to go home. He's a German artist from Dortmund, Germany. He lives now in Brooklyn, and he was splitting his time between Dortmund and Brooklyn when we started working together. So anyway, I'm getting all worked up because this guy, I really wanted to work with him, and I didn't want him to go home. So there's a time in the morning right before I wake up that my brain starts working, and I got up at 6. I went out to the studio. And he was using these ketchup squirting bottles to apply the paint. And I started changing their viscosities, hoping that by changing their rate of flow that something might happen. Because I know from working with Hayter that high viscosity inks and low viscosity inks don't like to mix. They reject each other. So I started playing around with the inks. And then he came in after his coffee, and I said, okay, here it is. I taped off the size of the paper on the press bed, the stainless steel press bed. I said, just paint on the press bed. And he says, why? I said, just do it. I don't know why. I don't know what's going to happen. He does his drawings. We lay these huge sheets of paper right down on the press bed. We crank the pressure all the way down. Now, I'm flying blind here. I have no clue what's going to happen on the other end of this thing. And we run it through the press, and it was spectacular. And he was high-fiving me all day. And it was it's something to do with the pressure. I mean, I don't know the physics of it. I know that the physics has something to do with it. But it's something with the viscosity and the pressure. And we didn't even use you can see we don't even use a felt. The back of the roller goes right on the back of the paper. And it just crushes it. And all this weird mixing and flowing happens. And so he says, you can't use this technique for anybody else now. This is my technique. So that's true. I mean,
did he pay
why not?
You some sort of fee?
No. He just keeps coming back and making work, and we sell a lot of it. He's just amazing. He is a juggernaut of an artist. He has so much energy, and he's amazing with color, and he's a lot of fun to work with. His playlist is interesting, but.
Experimental jazz.
Yeah, but he's super fun to work with. He's a great guy, and he's very generous, and we've done really well. Yeah.
Nice.
You're going to see a big 48 by 48 inch monotype in my booth today, tomorrow, or whenever, the weekend.
Day after.
Tomorrow night. Yeah. But anyway, he's great. He's a lot of fun to work with, which is really what I can actually say that is that this is not work. I have so much fun doing this with people. It's like every project is a challenge, but it's super fun. Wouldn't change it a thing.
When people come to work with you, first of all, it's by invitation.
Mm-hmm.
People can't just approach you and say, "Hey, look at my portfolio."
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Does
I'm
it ever
generally,
work?
No.
Okay.
But I look. I mean, it seems a polite thing to do.
I agree.
And I only have so much time in the
Yeah.
day, so I can only do. I used to do a lot more projects a year. I'm sort of slowing down.
Well, it happens when.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when somebody's in the shop with you, like Markus has to be on site, unlike
Yep.
George, who's mailing you the plates.
Yep.
Do they stay? Do you have an apartment for artists in residence?
We do. Well, we have a beautiful guest room in our 19th century farmhouse.
Okay,
right
so
next door to the studio.
You're the chef too.
I'm a chef too.
Yeah. Janine benefits from the chefage.
She does.
Yes.
Chefage.
Chefage.
Yeah.
Nice.
We have a
made up
nice
new
wine
word.
cellar too. That helps the artists. Little liquid inspiration is always good. They get to stay during their residency, and it's a lot of fun. It's like having,
Print camp.
it's like print camp.
Yeah.
It's like a guest.
All right.
A guest house.
So the idea of working with somebody who designs type for a living is a little left field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How
well-
did this all happen?
So we've known Matthew. This is Matthew Carter, who's probably the most famous type designer on the planet. And most of the great type. He's a digital type designer, although he started as a punch cutter way back in the day. So most of the great fonts that are on your computer, he's designed. Ones like Verdana and Georgia, if anybody type nerds out there. He's designed for Microsoft and Apple, and he's the man, and he's 88 years old and still working. He was a social friend. We both are members of the Society of Printers in New York, which is this very old, funny, interesting, stodgy kind of group of people. And so one day I had this idea, and I have to say it was inspired by Bill Thompson, who told me, because he also, we're friends with Matthew, and said, you should do a project with Matthew, something with type. And so I pulled him aside and said, listen, I'd like to make a series of aquatints of typefaces of letter forms, entire alphabet, designed by you, and put them in a portfolio and sell them as a group. And he said, that's interesting, I'll get back to you. Didn't hear from him for a while. And then he would always sort of skulk away from me at the Society of Printers meetings because he didn't want, and I didn't want to push him. But anyway, I told him.
But you did.
I did, and he said to me, he says, Jim, a letter is a thing, not a picture of a thing, and I don't want to make a bunch of pictures of things. I said, Matthew, I'm going to make you a thing. He said, okay, I'll send you something, and you do what you do, and I'll decide after that. So he sent me the digital file for the A and the Z, and 2 typefaces he designed over his 60-plus years career, and he said, do what you do. So I photo etched I made clear film positives from the files, photo etched them onto copper plates with aquatint, etched them deep into the plate, dropped a beautiful aquatint on them, super black, printed them with Sheen Collet, and I printed them on twin rocker handmade paper. And he said, well, these are things. These are things. He said, okay, so I'll agree to do it, but you have to wait until I decide what goes between those 2 letters. I said, great. 2 years later, he finally gives me the final group of things, and it's really spectacular. I mean, there's nothing been done like it in this form. The aquatint and the beautiful portfolios. Janine designed the beautiful portfolio. She also designed a beautiful booklet. He wrote notes for every letter, every typeface, the historic and aesthetic influences of every single type. And Janine designed the handmade booklet. It's hand-bound, and it comes with the portfolio, and it tells you the origins of each of those typefaces, and it's really cool. So we finished that in 2016, and you'll see in my booth, I bugged him, and he agreed to do it. It took many years for him to agree to do 0 to 9, the figures 0 to 9. And so we have those as a secondary one. And it's done really well. And they're really, I mean, if people are into type, it's one of the cool, I love going through it. So come look at it. It's a
I
really
always like to tell people
great project.
the most interesting things are under the table, and to ask the person behind the table
That's
to
right.
show you what's under there.
So,
'Cause
but that was an enormous undertaking. I mean, but time and materials, that's like $150,000 and about 2 years of my life on press printing those editions.
print publishing is a long game, people.
Yeah, but we've done very well with it, so no complaints.
Okay, so, yeah. Oh, jeez. Oh,
Sorry about that, guys.
Jeez. Let's start that over.
Yeesh.
Okay, here we are.
Oh my God, that's terrible. Wow, John Wilson.
Jim had a chance to work with John Wilson, who did the most incredible various portraits of Martin Luther King Jr., including the bust that's in the Capitol Rotunda. Is it still in there?
Yes, it's still there, believe it or not. Even after January 6th, you think that that would be.
Yeah. So you got him to come in and work his butt off on this giant. These are big.
Yeah, it's a
giant
36
plate.
by 30 inch plate.
Yeah, and so Jim very nicely ran states for him. So everyone know what a state is? Should we tell them what a state is?
Yeah, so as the artist is working on the copper plate, especially with John, who's so direct with his draftsmanship, you're working on the plate and you don't really know what it looks like until it's etched and proofed. So John would do his drawing on it, I would etch it, I would proof it, and I just had the wherewithal to keep a state of each one handy, so that he can see the progression of things. And in this case, it took 18 states to get to the final state. These are a little mixed up, so...
What?
Yeah, that's not state one, but that's okay, no worries.
Jimmy!
But anyway, no worries.
Jim sent me 203 pictures.
I know, don't worry about it, but that's okay. So, in any case, John struggled with it because both the likeness and the character of the drawing had to come together. And, the very beginning, the drawing was strong, but the likeness was not very strong. And then we had to scrape the whole thing back down. He built it up slowly, and it took 18 states. Each time, he does the drawing. He's drawing in the studio. Then I have to etch it, and then I have to proof it. And you're talking like a good hour for all this to happen, And so that fractured nature of this process where, the distance between the time of him actually working on the plate and him seeing his result the distance is quite far, right? And so it's hard for him to sort of anticipate what's coming off the plate. He got better as we got further along, and I pulled the reins in because John is a sculptor, so he felt he really needed to work the plate, and he would go too far each time, either too dark or too light, too dark, too light. But we finally got him to sort of take baby steps towards the end and got to finish the image, the likeness. Everything was spectacular. What you're seeing too at the end there is an image of the copper plate, still steel-faced. All 18 states, the final state, and the copper plate, I was able to sell to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, which really where it belonged, and they have that in the collection. It's pretty spectacular.
Do you want to explain steel face?
Oh, steel facing, yeah. So with copper plates, and especially in an image like this where there's a lot of subtle tone, aqua tints, and some lines that were really delicate, if I was to print, the edition was going to be 50 plus proof, so I had to get about 75 good prints off of this thing. A lot of those delicate textures would wear out by then. So you actually electroplate steel onto the surface, micron thick, onto the copper plate in order to harden it, and it keeps it from breaking down in the edition. That will tend to, sometimes like this, in this plate we had to flash it 3 times, because as soon as I start to see copper showing through, I stop and I flash it, put the steel back on it, and then continue the edition. So that protected it. So the first print is as good as the 50th print. Did
you take the steel facing off before it went to the...
I did not, I did not. And I put a hard ground on it in order to protect it. And so it still has a steel face on it. And they wanted to exhibit it, but they didn't have enough time to create the hermetically sealed box that they wanted to show it in. And I'm like, that thing's been kicking around my studio about 8 years before you people bought it, sitting around my studio. And you're worried about, this atmospherically correct box. And they looked at me and said, it's an artifact now, Jim. So,
the minute it crosses the threshold of the museum,
oh my gosh, yeah, so
it becomes precious.
Yeah, it's pretty precious.
I have a couple plates that I wanted to put in the Atelier 17 show by Ian Hugo, and they had come to me from the estate, and there was ink still in the lines, and they kind of schmutzy, and they oxidized a bit, and the conservation staff wouldn't agree to clean the plates for exhibition.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because it might be the ink from the art. I'm like, I don't care.
Oh, yeah. There was no ink on that plate, just the hard
I'm
ground.
sure, because you are spectacular. All right, we have to move
Move
along
along,
because,
yeah.
yes, all right, we're going to keep going.
You'll
Lots of
see
these
here
things,
on my
you'll see
booth,
these.
we got some super fresh watercolor monotypes by Eva Lunsager, Boston area painter, but she's terrific. And
Yeah, these are beautiful.
Really
The color's
great.
gorgeous. Oops, sorry. These brides are, you don't have these here, do you?
No, I don't, because they're sold
Moving
out.
moving on.
But it's a great project. I do have this gentleman's, that blue poppy woodcut, which is enormous. That's his first woodcut. He showed up one day with a really bad proof of it. He'd been working on it for over a year, and he tried to take a proof of it by hand with a wooden spoon. And he says, "Can I show you something?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And he brings it over, and he goes, "What's wrong with this?" I'm like, You didn't bring it to me to print.
You
That's
need a press,
Yeah,
dude.
what the heck is wrong? So we set it up, and we were able to get an extraordinary impression off it with my big press, and so we printed the edition. There is an impression of this very print in my booth, as well as the heron on the right.
Yeah.
Actually, not in the booth, but in the truck. So if you want to come out to the van, I'll show it to you in the truck.
Hint.
So,
We'll do a deal on the truck.
yeah. There you go.
There's a lot. There's really wonderful things going on, and I love that you do etching and monotype and the occasional woodcut with Richard, because it's versatility must be fun.
It is. No, it's really great. The monotypes are really super fun. This is a great project, Rachel Perry, and so she's known to do installation drawings with common objects, like kitchen objects, like twistums. She would make into long, colorful lines, and then do wall drawings with the twistums with these long lines. And also bread tags. She'll do installations with those colorful bread tags that she has boxes or barrels full. And I wanted to make a print with her, and I said, let's do something with your bread tags. And I had some pre-sensitized photo copper plates handy, and she just laid them down in this array, as you can see, and then I exposed them, and then I etched them very deep into the plate, and I dropped an aquatint into those, and then printed them in white ink. And the white ink tends to oxidize when you wipe it on the plate because of the friction between the pigment and the copper, which was a good thing. It created that beautiful tone inside. But every one of those bread tags are sitting up, thick white ink sitting up off the plate, so they look like they're actual objects sitting on the plate. And I think there are 88 different bread tags, and not one is the same as the other. You can't believe that there are at least 88 different designs of bread tags.
Yeah, now you're going to start collecting them and be amazed.
I mean, they're amazing. And so come see that. I have an impression of that in the booth.
Rachel's one of my favorites.
She's really
the
brilliant.
detritus of her life. It's an amazing thing. Oh, God, here comes Elizabeth. She's going to ask some questions. All right, so these are in
Raul
the booth
Gonzalez
too.
III.
Yep, he's there.
So and I have this, and he's born in El Paso. His parents are from Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. He is a self-taught artist, beautiful, beautiful draftsman and painter. I have some drawings by him in the booth, but he's become a hugely successful children's book illustrator and writer, and that's his career. The Lowrider series is what he's became known for, and he's done several more. In any case, early on in his career, I saw some drawings at a collector's home and invited him to come in to make prints, and he did that. And what's really fun about the Chine Colle that you saw behind that sheet, all that stain is all Mexican coffee. Every Chine Colle he stained with Mexican coffee in advance.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, which is archival.
Heavens. Jim's also an artist, by the way. These are paintings on the right and prints on the left.
Yeah, prints and actually paintings and drawings. That's on the left are drawings, and that series from a series I did. We had Janine and I had a residency in Beijing a bunch of years ago, like 2012, I think, and the density of the landscape and cityscape was such that I made these very dense geometric abstract paintings that really, I think, very successful. And then there's a series of those on the left are a series of etchings which are abstract numerals. They're all, and it'd be fun. I have a copy of that portfolio here.
Under the table?
Actually, we have them on top of the table. That's how good they are.
So just... So the last couple of pictures are just images of booths that Jim has had at various fairs, including last year here, which I thought was great. But also in Baltimore, thank you so much.
That's Peter Pettengill, by the way, one of the great master printers, great friend, and he's a genius.
Wingate Studios, he's an amazing printer as well. Also a guest on the pod. And this is Jim's booth at the first Baltimore print fair that we did that wasn't involved with the museum. So the first post-museum fair.
I think one of my best booths ever.
It was a great booth. You brought the paintings that went with the
I brought a primary work by each of the artists next to the prints to show the relationship between them, and it was really great.
We could talk about the term primary, but we won't.
Okay. I call it primary.
So then there was this fair in 2014 in Boston where he and his poor son had to move the goddamn
so we actually moved
the
press. We moved the press into my booth to do demonstrations. And there's a video. If you go to the video section of the Center Street Studio website, my son made a very funny video of the process of moving that press into it. It's hilarious.
Insanity.
Yes, he was my studio assistant for a year after college, and it was my highest grossing year in the history of Center Street Studio when he worked for me, and then he went out.
Well, he's a charmer.
I know. He's going to be in New York for the IPDA fair, so he's coming in from Seattle. Yeah.
This is the last fair that we did at the Baltimore Museum of Art in 2017 that Jim came to with I think it was the first time Matthew Carter was up.
The first time Matthew Carter was shown,
And what's the name of the artist who did the Trump?
That's Brian Andrew Whiteley.
That's right, Whiteley.
That was in 2016 when he wasn't even he was a candidate Trump. He wasn't even the nominee.
He was,
And he had that tombstone made, and we put it in the sheep meadow section of Central Park on Easter Sunday morning in April of 2016, and the epitaph said "Made America Hate Again," and it was a memento mori. It was basically saying, change your attitude. You got to. It's called the Trump Legacy Stone, by the way. So it was really for him to consider. You too shall die. You should reconsider your legacy. Because he was dividing the country in order to control us. To divide the country to win, to divide and conquer. And so this was a very, it was a political protest piece. Of course, people thought it was potential death threat against the candidate, and he was sought out by the Secret Service and was questioned for 4 hours, and he convinced them it was a political protest piece and not a death threat.
And at the fair, Jim was doing rubbings of it.
Yeah, so I made prints from, I had a great idea. When I saw it on Instagram, I called him up and said, I have an idea for a print project. When he got it back from the police locker, evidence room, honestly, I mean, it was up for about maybe 2 hours, and then it got confiscated by the Park Service and the police, and then the hunt was to find him. So I suggested we make a series of tombstone rubbings directly as a print project, and they've been pretty successful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Frotage. The Cleveland Print Fair, which you do usually, right?
Yeah, I'll be doing it again in a few weeks. Yeah.
Okay, yep, it's coming up very soon. And then this is the logo for the podcast, which has also included an interview with Susan Teller, who's sitting right here. So there's lots of really cool and interesting guests on there. I encourage you guys to explore. We also do a series of the history of print with my friend True Ludwig. There's 3 episodes on Rembrandt. There's 2 on Durr. That it gives on and on and on. We're in the middle of the 18th century, so onward we go. But it's a labor of love, and having people like Jim on is a true honor, and I love connecting people, and things have happened because they've listened and been in touch with people, and projects have happened. It's super exciting. So
it is. It's a great podcast. I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun and really informative, and get to see a lot of people in the print ecosystem that you didn't know existed, and it's really fun.
Well, the whole plan of it was to demonstrate that you don't necessarily need to be the artist. You can be creative adjacent in many, many, many ways, including being the master printer, obviously. But I have a guest coming up in a few weeks who is retired now, an engraver for the Treasury Department, and engraved the Benjamin Franklin portrait on your $50 banknote. That's my brother. Okay. So he'll walk you through the process of trying to get a new bill made in the Treasury, which was no easy feat. But I just have a great time finding people who have these really cool jobs that are, right in there, but not exactly what you might think of as I'm the artist or I'm the printer. So it's been really fun. But thank you for joining me at the 30th McNay Print Fair.
No, super special, live, unedited.
Live and unedited, and congratulations to the museum for keeping the light lit, keeping the printmaking going. So thank you all for joining us tonight. All right, Elizabeth has some questions. We're going to entertain a few questions that may have come in on the web thing.
We have a couple questions, and thank you for just continuing your conversation. I could sit print nerd, but I could sit all night and listen to you guys talk. That was incredible. We got a really interesting question. What do you think artists working in different media learn when they make prints?
That's really interesting. Well, I don't think it's funny. It's not so much about technique. I think it's a way for them to sort of rediscover issues in their primary medium. We'll talk about that. Because it really, for them, it is. I mean, most of the artists that I'm working with are not printmakers, and I've brought them into the studio to sort of expand their ideas and get them out of their own studio and out of their normal way of working. And so I've actually had artists who've come in, made prints with me, discovered something in their work they hadn't seen, and then used that in their next series of paintings. So the dialogue opened up in the opposite direction, and I think that that's really great. And the important thing to stress here is that they're not coming in to make prints of their work in their other medium. They are making original works of art that are related to, and are being filtered through a technique and a process that makes it meaningful within that process. So it's a print. It's a print because it's a print. The painting is a painting. The print is a print, and that it's informed by process and by technique and the physicality of the plate and the ink and all that stuff. But the process of getting there, the thinking process, is sort of outside their normal way of thinking, outside their box. And they can trust in me that when they say, okay, I want to move in this direction, they trust that I will figure out a way to do it. And it's not like it's a set. I mean, there are rules you have to follow, but you can massage it a little bit and make things happen. I'd make things happen that didn't happen before, because I had this idea, and so they discover that and they see their work in a new light, and that's the most important thing, when they can learn something about their work they didn't know before.
I think it also has to do with working, if they're lucky enough to have a relationship with a printer, that there is a dialogue and a community that happens that takes them out of their own head, the artist in their garret studio in Paris or whatever. Like they're in a shop with somebody else who's going, well, what about this, and this? We could do this, and this. And it just takes them I think, enough outside of their normal thought process that it sparks something new.
This is a fun one. What was it like working with Hayter?
I not only got to work with Hayter, I got to be his doubles partner in tennis like twice a week. So he needed a pair of young legs to chase down the ball half the time.
You were just running around him on the court.
Oh my God, especially lobs. And they're a big chip and lob group over there. Let me tell you, it's really interesting. So in any case, he found out I played tennis. I did bring my racket with me, and I played on these clay courts in the shadow of the Bastille. And I remember I would always make sure I had my gear with me, and the phone would ring like around 1 o'clock, which is the end of the morning session, and it would always be for me. And Bill's like, "You got your stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Meet me over there," and I'd run, But in any case, that was kind of fun. But working with Hayter, he was sort of like an impresario at that point. He came in, and he would just expound on, he'd look at everybody's work, and tell you, and then talk about his ideas, and then off he went. It wasn't like he was micromanaging or telling you should be doing this, that. He basically came in, he was like this big personality. And then there were other people, the Massier, that were there to sort of help you out with the technical stuff and whatnot. And other people, like there's a wonderful expat American, George Ball, who came in to help people with engraving. And he's absolutely beautiful Biernist. I mean, just great. And the most gentle of souls, and he was great. He would come in, and he was just a great guy. But Hayter would just come in with that big hair, and he'd push it back, and he wasn't smoking at that point, but he'd just come in and just give us this big talk, and then come in and look at people's work and say things and how bad it was or how good it was or whatnot. It was pretty funny. But yeah, that was pretty much. But I got to know him only because of tennis, and and then when he needed something heavy moved in the studio, he'd call me up too. So, but yeah, it was great. It was he was an amazing character, And he turned 80 when I was there, and they had one hell of a bash. Let me tell you. I can't tell you much about it because I don't remember.
Well, another question. Jim, you've talked a lot about what gives you joy about making prints and working in printmaking, but what is or was for you the hardest part? of printmaking?
Standing at press for 8 hours a day,
I
just
thought you were going to say standing at
making
a fair.
the donuts. What's that?
I thought you were going to say standing at a fair.
Actually, that's a lot of fun because I get to talk about the work and I get to sell it for me and the artist, and that's actually I like the fairs. Actually, it's really fun. But yeah, no, it's really standing at press 8 hours a day when you're in production mode is really hard. And usually I have a studio assistant that helps speed things up. But I did it, and I was I didn't hate it back then, and I can do it really well, obviously. But now it's getting old. It's like, especially the numbers. I'm finishing the editions of the 0 to 9, and I don't have a studio assistant, so I'm doing it all myself. And and Janine's like, you need to get back in the studio and get those printed. I'm always finding excuses, right, not to print. She's shaking her head. Yes.
In some shops, with a larger staff, there's a division of labor where there's somebody who is the collaborating printer who's working with the artist and playing with the ideas, and then there's a team that makes the edition happen. So you can get the young bucks in there, and they're ruining their shoulders themselves.
Yeah.
But
a lot of rotator cuff injuries in my biz.
Yeah, when you're a one-man band, it's everything from soup to nuts.
Yeah. I think that's true. I'm stupid because I just don't think anyone can print it as good as me, so I have to do it myself, which is really like So, but I'm going to get this done. I swear.
Wait, was it Walker or Ryder?
Both of them worked. Both of my sons worked for me for summer, and Ryder only for that year.
I bet they can work a plate.
They didn't. They didn't, but they were like clean hands. So basically, they were prepping paper, getting it on press. I'm inking and wiping the plates, laying it down, run it. They put it to the print dryer and start inking again, so it sped things up nicely. But but since COVID, I haven't had a studio assistant, which is I have an intern coming from RISD in May, but other than that, I've had a studio assistant.
Summer of action.
Yeah, I got to get this thing done. I got to get it done. So there you go.
And we've gone just a hair over time, but we do have one more interesting question that I think will get at the practicality of what you do and how you work. Since you work directly with each artist, how many projects do you have cooking at one time? Especially since some can take years.
Honestly, I can't juggle that many balls at once, so I do one at a time. And I do one at a time, like from start to finish. I've talked to some people. I've talked to artists who I've seen on your podcast. You talk about how the editions have taken years for it to happen. No, I need to get it done. We need to just get it done. I don't think there's ever been one that we've. And I also make sure the editions get done. Like there's some printers that'll do like the first half of the edition and then leave it and then come back to the remainder edition.
Mistake.
It's a big mistake because just getting it up and running again. Once you're in that flow, you do not want to stop, and the consistency of the edition is better, and it's just better overall. And it's a matter of discipline and just get the project finished. So I do one at a time. I mean, I might have invited other people and scheduled them later, but there's never two projects in the shop at the same time, pretty much. Although, that's a bit of, I had Markus Linnenbrink in recently to do a monotype project, but with Matthew still on press, but I can put that aside and just do this other project. And they're on two separate presses. So, and with Markus, as you can see, there's a lot of ink involved. So you don't want to put anything as clean as Matthew's near that press because it's a lot of ink. Yeah, it's a big mess.
Well, thank you both. This was a lot of fun and incredibly interesting. And thank you all for coming out tonight.
Yeah.
Hey everybody. A huge thank you to James Stroud for joining me in this live recording of Platemark at the McNay. It was such a fun fair, and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to go. A thank you also to Chief Curator Elizabeth Mitchell and Museum Director Matthew McClendon for having me. The McNay Art Museum has a really wonderful history of doing a fair, and I just cannot say enough good things about it. If you are anywhere near San Antonio next year when they have their fair in March, you should get there. Thank you to the audience who joined us at the McNay, and also, of course, to you, our listeners, for helping us celebrate the magic of the multiple. As always, you can find images of the works we discussed in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. I need to thank my team, Dan Fury of Extension Audio. Thanks for helping me sort it all out, as always. And one also to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. And lastly, a thank you to Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for sending me sounds from their studios that helped me build the soundscape at the top and bottom of each episode. All right, I'm Ann Shafer, and this is Platemark.